Hello, my name is Toni Marie Burkhalter, and I'm here to introduce you to the topics of joint motion and the articular system for Kinesiology 186 or human movement. Today we're going to be talking about joint motion in the articular skeleton. What do you know about joint motion? Well, first of all, joint motion relates directly to joint structure. A joint is any location where two bones meet. There are three different types of joint structures: fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. Today we're going to be talking about all three and how to classify them. Fibrous joints are most typically categorized as joints without a synovial joint cavity and joints with fibrous tissue. There are two main types of fibrous joints: suture joints and syndesmosis joints. Suture joints connect bones through tight interlocking bones with dense connective tissue around the joint. You can find many fibrous joints in your skull, ensuring that these joints do not move. Syndesmosis are joints that are connected by ligaments. An example would be the joint between the tibia and the fibula in your leg. The tibia and fibula are two separate bones connected with a robust ligament. Thus, movement between those two bones is very limited. The second type of joint structure is a cartilaginous joint, which allows for more movement than a fibrous joint, but significantly less movement than a synovial joint. In the mature skeleton, a cartilaginous joint can be found at the sternocostal joint, at the growth plates, and temporarily in the pelvic bone of a delivering mother around the time of delivery. But to me, the most exciting type of joint is the synovial joint, allowing for amazing mobility and range of motion. When most people think of a joint, they immediately think of a synovial joint, which you can find in your knees, your hips, your ankles, your shoulders, your elbows, and wrists. Synovial joints are characterized by a joint cavity which is filled with synovial fluid and encapsulated by a fibrous joint capsule with articular cartilage lining the joint surface of each bone. Each component of the structure is essential to know. Think about the role of each. For example, the synovial fluid acts as a sort of cushion and lubrication, reducing friction. If the joint is injured, excessive fluid is produced to further reduce friction on the joint and the bones. Now that we know what a synovial joint is, let's classify synovial joints into their different types. There are 6 different types of synovial joints: gliding, hinge, pivot, condyloid, saddle, and ball and socket. Most of these types of joints sound self-explanatory, but to erase any question you might have, let's go over the basics. First, we have gliding joints, which allow for the gliding of bones away and towards each other, like the bones of your wrist, right in here. Second, we have a hinge joint. An example is your knee. This joint acts as sort of a hinge and allows forward and backward movement like you'd find, such as like with your elbow between your ulna and your humerus. Third, we have pivot joints that allow for circular range of motion, such as at your radius in relation to your humerus. When you rotate your forearm, that's a pivot joint in action. Fourth, we have a condyloid joint. These you may not have heard as much about, but they're here at your knuckles. These allow for a slight circular motion, but mainly forward and backward movement. Fifth, we have a saddle joint that's located between your carpal and metacarpal, right here in your thumb. If you cup both your hands and fit them together and try to move them without separating your hands, this is the range of motion that your thumb has. Cool, huh? The last type of synovial joint is the ball and socket joint. This type of joint is self-explanatory and can be located between the socket on your scapula and the head of your humerus. In other words, right here in your shoulder. Ball and socket joints, like your shoulder and hip joints, allow for the most movement compared to any other joints. Now that we know that your joints move, let's discuss where they move in relation to movement planes. Movement planes refer to a hypothetical plane or flat surface that would divide the body during movement. For example, say you lift your knee to your chest. That movement occurred in the sagittal or median plane, as the knee could theoretically divide the body into right and left halves when moved towards the chest. If you were to do a different movement and you were to do the twist, this would occur in the transverse or axial plane, cutting the body into top and bottom halves. And if you did jumping jacks, you'd be moving in the frontal or coronal plane, cutting the body into front and back. However, many of your joints move in multiple planes. The ability of these joints to move in multiple planes makes it so that your movement doesn't look robotic. However, some singular joints are uniplanar and only have a singular axis of rotation. Your hip joints, on the other hand, are triplanar. They move in 3 planes: the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane. So now you know what movements your joints can and should be doing. Until the next time, be good to your joints.